everyone, and welcome back to Age Better, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. A few weeks ago, I heard an incredible lecture called Stronger Aging, an Integrative Health Approach to Preventing Decline, given by Dr. Karen Koffler. And I knew as soon as I heard it that this medical expert absolutely positively had to come on the show, and here's why. Her approach to aging isn't just about treating diseases as they happen. It's about creating balance and health throughout our lives to prevent those diseases from happening in the first place. So I finally got some time on her very busy calendar to record this episode. And as a result, I've added a few more to-dos to my own list of things that will help me to age better. And once you listen to this conversation, I know you will too. Here's a bit about my guest. Dr. Karen Koffler is the medical director of the Osher Center for Integrative Health at the University of Miami. She was in the first class of physicians trained at the University of Arizona's Integrative Medicine Fellowship, working very closely with Dr. Andrew Weil, who is a true pioneer in this field and was one of the earliest physicians to achieve certification in functional medicine. Dr. Koffler's philosophy is crystal clear. While we cannot control everything about our health, we can control a heck of a lot, about 95% in fact. And during our discussion, she shared all those things that you can control to age better, starting today. So sit back, relax, and get the scoop on a new era of aging with Dr. Karen Koffler. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Age Better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman, and today my guest is Dr. Koffler, and welcome to Age Better, Dr. Koffler.
Thank you for having me.
So you recently gave a talk, which I really loved, entitled Stronger Aging, an Integrative Health Approach to Preventing Decline, which got a lot of media attention, including from me. And I invited you to come on the show to talk about your approach to successful aging, as you expressed it so perfectly in your lecture. So let's dive right in, starting with, what are the foundational principles of integrative health, and how do they differ from conventional medical approaches?
Yeah, so integrative health, which is currently sort of a specialty in medicine, but I think if we do this well, it will become medicine. And it's based primarily in the notion of a healing orientation, which is really distinct from conventional medicine, which actually has a disease orientation. So as we're training medical students, we're teaching them about diseases. And what we omit in doing that, which by the way is very important, but what we omit is that we don't emphasize the intrinsic healing capacity of everyone, of every cell, of every tissue. And when you don't think like that, you lose access to a whole reservoir of opportunities for people to heal. First of all, it's a healing orientation. In other words, it acknowledges that intrinsic within us is the drive towards healing. It also appreciates the role of the mind and the spirit in the health of the body. So those three are intertwined. And while we separate out, we parse up the patient, we parse up people, and we have subspecialists and specialists, the reality of it is everything affects everything. So we appreciate the impact that the mind has on the body has on the mind, the spirit has on all of it. We really emphasize lifestyle. We believe that the majority of the issues that we see as people age can be directly related to the lifestyle choices they made year after year. And so we really work to educate people to understand how their choices are influencing how they feel. And then finally, we also make use of the therapeutic relationship, which we feel that as physicians, our role is to educate and inspire. And when we create a sort of safe environment for patients to really examine how they're approaching their lives, they have the opportunity to see it more clearly and make other choices, especially when they're educated as to what those choices are doing. And then lastly, we make use of all available evidence-based therapies. I do not have buy-in into any one system. I believe in the healing capacity of acupuncture and Ayurvedic medicine and massage and all kinds of other therapies that have very low invasiveness. In other words, they're rather kind to the body, but can have a very big impact on healing. So we're more apt to use those strategies and sort of save drugs and surgery in case everything else doesn't work.
Is integrative medicine the same as functional medicine?
Actually, the two are there's quite a bit of overlap in philosophy, but there are some distinctions. And I've melded the two. I've trained in both, so I've melded the two. But you can be seeing an integrative doc who does not know much about functional medicine. And likewise, functional medicine docs might not use some of the integrative strategies that we use in integrative health. So there is a distinction. Functional medicine very much believes in lifestyle, very much believes in environmental influences on health, and then also has a strong appreciation for the interplay of lifestyle, environment, and genes. We do a lot of sophisticated testing in functional medicine that isn't typically done by integrative docs. But many of us are beginning to blend both.
Got it. Thank you for explaining that. Was there a pivotal moment in your own career or in your own life that made you decide to take this path in medicine?
Oh, yes.
Oh, tell us about it.
I was actually a hospitalist doc working in a teaching center in Denver, Colorado. And I was working in the intensive care unit one night at about 2:00 in the morning and reading through the patient's charts. This is in the days when we still had paper charts. That's how long ago it was. And I sat back and I realized he had been admitted 6 previous times for the exact same problem. And as I looked around the ICU that night, I realized that I knew half the patients from previous admissions. And a light bulb went off saying, what I'm doing is essentially futile. I am not changing anything. I am not creating health for these people at all. I'm simply stabilizing them, discharging them to the floor, getting them home, only to welcome them back again. And as I looked at that, I realized our tools were very insufficient for making a real difference in a person's life. And our focus was off. And so I began really questioning everything about medicine as a result. And I had the good fortune of working with a psychologist in the hospital who I used to send to see all my patients because I knew the patients always had a very rich story as to why they were in the hospital. And she was great at getting it and then sharing that information with me. And together we could start to do something to make a difference. And she suggested that I go to a conference, which I was pretty reluctant to go to, but ended up going to in the end. And there was a plenary speaker who began his talk with the following sentence that I never forgot. He said, "We do not have a healthcare system in this country. We have a disease management system in this country." And I thought, that's exactly what my frustration
That's what you were feeling
all
that
we're
night
doing
in
is
the
managing
hospital.
disease. We're not creating health. Yeah. So that speaker was Andrew Weil.
Okay.
And at the end of his talk, I had no idea who he was. This was 1996.
Okay.
He was sort of reaching, sort of the peak of his popularity. And at the end of his talk, he said, "We're starting a fellowship to retrain physicians in a new way of practicing medicine." And I had no idea what that meant, but I said, "I'm going." And I was fortunate to be the first class of physicians trained at the University of Arizona.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Wonderful story. And you're familiar with Dr. Gladys McGarry.
Yes.
I'm sure. She was on the show last May, actually, when her book came out that became a bestseller.
Yes.
Delightful, of course. She was then 102. Now she's 103 and still doing podcast interviews and is regularly being interviewed on Instagram Live. And it's really quite amazing. And this was a pivotal point in your career and your life, apparently, and which caused you to go into this direction. And that's wonderful. And I'm really hoping that more and more physicians do take your approach. I'm a big believer in everything you're saying so far. In your lecture, you did mention a unique perspective on aging, because that's really what I like to focus on. Like, how does all of this impact how we age? So can you elaborate on how integrative health views the aging process differently from traditional medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I think that tying back to what I said earlier, I think if you appreciate that the body is designed to heal, the body has the capacity to regenerate. It does it all the time. It particularly does it during deep stage sleep, by the way. But if you can appreciate that, then you can start thinking about, okay, what am I doing to support that? And what am I doing that's detracting from that? And it requires being a good observer and being honest with your habits and be willing to make small changes, which can over time reap huge rewards. So I think part of it has to do with just appreciating that you can be 102 years old and still be building muscle, which is having a big impact on brain health, on cardiovascular health, on immune health, on outlook, on mood, etc. So studies have shown that. So appreciating that no matter what your age is, you are regenerating, you are healing. And the choices that you make either support that or detract from that.
Right. And it is little changes. You're absolutely right about that. Like really creating better sleep hygiene, as they call it.
Yes.
I like to track my sleep. I wear my Apple Watch when I'm sleeping. I use a sleep app because I do want to see when I've gotten the deep sleep and the REM and so on. And then I really do play around with what I do, like what time I go to sleep and what time I wake up. And if I've had a glass of wine or not had a glass of wine, for example, or have I worked out that day or not, and then you make adjustments accordingly. And I can see actually when everything has improved. So, and that's something I really encourage people to do,
So it shows, I'm so sorry. It shows that once you're educated, once you can see, that glass of wine really begins to affect me at 3 a.m. That's why I don't feel as restored the next day. Then you can it doesn't mean you can never have a glass of wine. It just means if you've got a big day the next day, that might not be a good choice.
Exactly right. Or if for some reason you must have that glass of wine, hopefully you don't have to, the word must isn't in there, but a lot earlier perhaps. But we also know all those studies that are coming out now about how that glass of red wine really isn't as healthy as we once thought. So so many studies about that. Really, there's nothing really that beneficial about wine, but
it's true.
So you talk about and write about 7 body systems that integrative health doctors examine for disruptions. So can you briefly describe what these systems are and their importance in healthy aging?
Sure. So this is really more born out of, I think, a functional medicine lens. And by focusing on these symptoms, you really improve organ function, energy, vitality, metabolism. So the organ systems are digestion and absorption, how well we break down our food, how well we absorb it, but also the integrity of the gut lining is all woven in there. And by the way, the gut includes the mouth. So it starts at the mouth and ends where it ends.
That's interesting because I don't think anybody really thinks that way.
Right.
That we don't really, although that makes complete sense.
Sure.
Connecting the mouth to the gut. Thank you.
Sure. Immune function. As we age, there is an aging that's happening to immune cells that we can play a role in slowing down and improving upon. our ability to generate energy, our hormonal system, our system of transport, and that includes not just blood vessels, which is very important, but lymphatics and the myofascial tissue of the body. So the fascia, which is a communication system, we now realize plays an important role in how we age and how we feel. Our ability to detoxify compounds, which is why I really think every doc that takes care of people 60 and older should be striving to reduce medications, not augment, because we're losing the ability to break down all those toxins. We've had a lifelong exposure of environmental toxins of all kinds. We don't need to add more to the system. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the movement system. So that includes joints, bones, and absolutely muscle. So if we attend to those 7 systems, we can really impact how well we age.
Do you have a book that you would recommend that goes into more detail about these 7 systems that you think I can, have a link to in the show notes so people can delve a little bit deeper?
I'm trying to think. I hope he forgives me for this because I can't remember the title. Mark Hyman had a book not too long ago on aging.
Yes, his new book. And of course, I'm having a mind blank too, but I know exactly the book you're talking about. It just came out and you're right. That is a great example of a terrific book. And I will put the link to that book when I remember the name of it. I'll look it up, everyone, and definitely check it out. But yes, thank you for that. Okay. Okay, let's get back to the microbiome and the mouth, of course, the connection there. Thank you for pointing that out. It is a hot topic. I've had several episodes focusing with microbiome experts focusing on the microbiome. And how does the gut microbiome influence how we age?
Yeah. So just a couple of things about the mouth. As women age and they lose estrogen, there's an impact on their gum health. There's also a reduction in saliva, which has an impact on tooth and gum health. And that can alter the microbiome. Anything that alters the health of the tissue can alter the microbiome. So it makes women's care of their teeth and gums even more important. So I always have my postmenopausal women go for full cleanings at least 3 times a year, maybe even quarterly.
That's amazing.
And be flossing.
That's an amazing and wonderful tip. I have to just point out before you continue, sorry for interrupting, but when I did have microbiome experts on the show, none of them ever mentioned the mouth. It just never came up.
Yeah.
None of this came up. And I see right now, this is a great example in my mind of the difference between integrative health and kind of more traditional medicine, where their lens was so narrow. Mm-hmm. It was so focused on just the microbiome. Mm-hmm. Then no one ever said, and everyone, make sure you're focusing on your mouth as well, for all of you who might be postmenopausal.
Right.
So thank you for that, and sorry for the interruption.
Right. So then when we go down to the microbiome, which is largely the colon, where the majority of the bacteria live, we realize a number of things. First of all, anything that happens upstream from that is going to influence the bacteria that inhabit our gut. And they're key, your audience probably already knows, but they're key for vitamin absorption. They're key for vitamin and nutrient production. So particularly vitamin K is made by our microbiome. They're incredibly important for maintaining the integrity of the gut lining, for keeping invading marauders out. And they just have an extraordinary number of roles, so much so that it is probably the fastest growing area of research in medicine today is the microbiome. In the last few years, there's been about 10,000 papers a year coming out just on this topic, which is massive. And so you can sort of understand how somebody gets so focused because it's difficult to keep up with it all.
True.
And
yes, true.
Yeah. So the microbiome, as we age, we typically make less acid and enzymes. We may have reduced motility. we have more exposures, and all of that can lead to a decrease in microbial diversity. And it turns out that diversity is key to maintaining the health of the microbiome and therefore the health of the gut and therefore the health of our immune systems, our brains, our hearts, our hormonal system, our metabolism, our mood, etc. So everything's affecting everything. So as we lose diversity, we now know that certain bacterial strain losses are associated with the development of specific diseases, like inflammatory bowel disease, for instance. Mm-hmm. So we're actually getting that refined that we can see what species can be associated with an increased tendency towards developing specific diseases.
It's really just incredible. And what can we do as we get older to maintain that diversity that we so need to age successfully? What do we do? Any tips?
At a macroscopic level, it's remembering that everything affects everything. So your lifestyle choices have a direct impact on your gut and your microbiome within your gut. So starting with nutrition, when you overfeed refined sugars, you are selecting for certain bacteria that will overgrow their bounds and compromise the health of other bacteria. When we use medications like Advil, ibuprofen, Motrin, and other medications that are prescribed, that can influence the health of the microbiome. When we don't have the motility, when we are not clearing out our bowels the way we should, that can influence. So being sure you're moving your bowels regularly, which is very easy to do with a combination of magnesium plus vitamin C or magnesium alone. So maintaining all of that. And then really understanding that what the bacteria enjoy feeding on is fiber. So having a diet that's rich in fiber, which really means you have a diet that's rich in vegetables, nuts and seeds, to some extent whole grains and fruits, will help nourish those bacteria. And eating fermented foods contributes, perhaps taking probiotics, especially if you've been on antibiotics, that may be of help.
Right.
These are all ways that you can improve your microbiome. But bearing in mind, movement, minimizing stress. When we're stressed, it actually stresses our bacteria and it reduces blood flow to the gut, which makes it produce less of its protective membrane, which makes it more susceptible to injury and infection. So everything affects everything.
Everything affects everything. And stress, I just want to get back to that for a minute. I've had a couple of episodes focusing on stress because who isn't stressed? Look what's going on in the world, in our country, and in your own personal universe, of course. If you, as I like to say, if you have humans in your life, there's always going to be something going on that might be joyful, sure, but also potentially stressful. So, how do we alleviate that stress? One way, of course, is, meditation and even micro meditation, spurts of meditation, breathing exercises. So I've covered a lot of that, which I do myself. I mean, I mentioned before that I like to wear my Apple Watch to sleep, to check on that. I also like to see how my heart rate is going. And, if you get stressed, your heart rate goes up and you don't want to do that. You don't want to keep it there elevated. And so I do breathing exercises and I like to watch it go down.
Right.
And it's so amazing to me that these simple tools really do work to kind of help your stress. So thank you for all of those tips. Definitely fiber. The microbiome experts who have been on the show, they really underscored that, adding a lot of fiber, of course, the fermented foods as well, and stress. You mentioned in your talk and elsewhere that a small number of genes are responsible for lifespan. How significant is the impact of, well, we've already discussed the lifestyle choices on aging compared to genetic makeup, but really, clearly you think lifestyle is key and essential. For sure, agree completely. But there is still the genetic component, right?
There is, but honestly, I consider it to be minimal. I really consider that to be minimal because
I agree with you.
lifestyle influences the expression of those genes. So
Right.
you can carry those genes. And really, only 5% of genetically based diseases are penetrant, which means only 5% of diseases that are based in a genetic issue are going to actually show up in a person. That means 95% is up to the choices that you make. So I don't even care about, I'm not going to worry about that small number. Those are more infrequent diseases. I do see them, but those are less common.
Right.
We have a great deal of dominion over how we age.
I always like to give people hope if they've been living a less than ideal life to date. And maybe they're just turning in and say, oh, I've got to really take better control of my life and my health. Let me start. And they're hearing all these tips and they might be wondering, is it too late? I feel it's never too late. Like you mentioned, starting to exercise, build up your muscle. We know this, that from all the studies that you can start building muscle when you're 102 years old, when you're 80, when you're 90,
Right.
when you're 60.
Right.
So what are your views on that? Is it ever too late?
Well, it goes back to what we said earlier. If you study, for those people who are waving the white flag, take a moment and look at some YouTube videos on cell physiology. What you are made up of is already working to heal you. It's repairing enzymes. It's repairing damaged DNA. At the microscopic level, you are healing. So you could start in the next moment after this podcast is over. The very next choice you make can actually create greater diversity in your microbiome. And we know that. Every time you eat a meal, you're affecting the microbiome. So you're either affecting it positively or negatively. And if you get it 80% right, we have the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard that plenty of times. Get it 80% right. The other 20%, let it go. It's fine. It's not going to influence in the long run. So really, every single time you begin again and again and again, and that's what life is. You're beginning again every day.
Yes.
You can make a huge impact. It all adds up. And by the way, studies show that all the time. Lifelong smokers will begin to heal their lungs the moment they stop smoking. That's a dense toxin that's usually repeated many times in a day. And still the lungs will clear that out.
Yeah, I always find that absolutely remarkably amazing
Right.
when I read that, but it's true. And I love what you said about just every day. You're just starting over every day. And everyone, you can have an impact on your health and your life and how you age in the future. As I also like to say, how you live now will help you, will decide how you age later.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think also, I think these things get easier when you have a quality of appreciation for this thing that we're in that is working so hard to get you through life.
Mm-hmm.
And being a little kinder to it, understanding what it's saying when it gives symptoms. When it gives symptoms off, it's telling you the state that it's in. Your job is to interpret that and assuage it in whatever way it needs to. So in other words, I think that people have a fight going on with their bodies or frustrated or don't want to give it attention, when in reality, it's sort of a wise machine that we're just learning how to operate better and better and better. So having compassion, I think, for yourself is important.
It's a form of self-love.
Exactly.
It really is. And probably the most important thing you can do is have some more compassion for this thing that we're in.
Yes.
I love that you called it that. So for our listeners and viewers who are very interested in adopting this lifestyle, which is a better lifestyle for sure, what are some of your best tips to just get them started? Practical tips.
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, pick something and integrate it in as a way of being. So, whatever resonates the most at this particular moment. So maybe it's move more. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? When you go to the grocery store, pick a further parking spot. Don't circle around trying to find the closest parking spot. Right. When you're heading up somewhere on an escalator, walk those steps instead of just passively letting it bring you to your destination. So integrate movement, because if we look at the healthiest societies in the world, they have natural movement. They're literally moving about every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're not going to the gym, and they're not lifting weights, and they're not running marathons. They are weaving movement in every day, and they're living really cognitively intact and physically robustly into their 100s. So that's possible for all of us. So I think increasing natural movement, take a walk after a meal. That has a massive impact on blood sugar levels and insulin and so forth, which helps your metabolism so that as you age, that's not continuing to slow. So natural movement.
Yeah,
get enough
super important. And, they've sorry to interrupt, but they've used different terms to try to get people more focused on this movement, very frequent movement throughout the day, exercise snacks, micro dosing on exercise, whatever you want to call it, everyone. But It is like what you were saying, the blue zones populations around the world that Dan Buettner follows, they move throughout the day. And you're right. They're living well into their 80s, 90s, 100s. Yeah.
Yes.
So what's the next one?
I would say get enough protein.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we age, we make less acid, and acid is really important in breaking down protein. And protein is critical in the regeneration of bone, of muscle, of all of our tissues. So adequate protein, which more or less is probably about 1 gram per kilogram, more or less. It's really person dependent on what they're working on, but that's something to shoot for. And that's not like for me, that's very difficult. I have to really concentrate on my protein intake. There's so much more we could say about food, because I really do think that probably 85% of your health is predicated on how you nourish your cells. But the other piece is recognize that when you ingest refined sugars, you overwhelm the cell, and in particular the mitochondria, and you make the mitochondria, which are the energy generating units of your cell. It's what drives the cell to do its work day by day and gives energy throughout the system. They become dysfunctional. We were not designed to take in refined carbs, but just a bit, just a tiny bit, which is why it's at the very top of the food pyramid, but
right,
like a tiny bit of it. And that's not easy in a society that's awash in sugar. So I'd say those two things are really important.
Yeah.
Sleep, safeguarding your sleep. In ancient times, we went to bed when it was dark and we got up when it became light again.
Right.
Previous generations slept 10 hours a day. We are so short shrifting our sleep. And
we really are.
Doing what you can.
Yeah, people do not give sleep. I've done a number of episodes focusing on sleep because I think it's so incredibly important. And I also know, and I'm sure everyone feels the same way, how you feel the next day when you have not had enough sleep or enough quality sleep. You feel a difference. And when it's constant and a regular thing for you, that can only, I just think it's logical. It can only be having a negative impact on your overall health and well-being. So you advocate for a plant-based diet. Are you personally like vegan or vegetarian? I'm just curious.
I'm not. Well, let me just say, left to my own devices, I would be vegetarian because I never liked meat. Mm-hmm. I just never liked eating animals. Since I'm a kid, I was a tough eater that way.
Yep.
However,
totally
I am very clear that we're designed to be omnivores. So with all due respect to my vegan friends and my vegetarian friends, and for the people who ascribe to that, And I appreciate that we don't necessarily have, well, we clearly do not have a very humane of feeding large numbers of people. However, if you just look at our biology and you look at our teeth and you look at the length of our gut, it is very clear we're designed to be omnivores. We're designed to eat both plant and animal. Of that, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
Then there's personal preference. And personally, I just do way better with plants. However, I can't meet my protein needs without incorporating some animal protein. And I have the good fortune of being married to a chef. So whatever he puts in front of me, I eat. I don't argue with him, but we do, the dominant thing in our diet is plants.
Yes.
And then really good quality protein is added.
Yeah. And you do reference Michael, I'm holding up my old battered copy of it, Michael Pollan's book, Food Rules, an Eater's Manual. It's this little book. I mean, if guys who are listening and watching, if you haven't yet read this book, I think it was from the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken. It is just brilliant. It's so simple. And what is the most famous line from this, Dr. Koffler? It's eat food, mostly plants.
Yeah, eat
if
food,
I'm not mistaken.
Not too much, mostly plants.
Not too much, right, exactly right. And that's so true. Such a simple rule. And I agree with you. Personally, I want to make sure I get enough protein. So I do eat animal protein, but really very little. It is mostly plant-based for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say it's always been like that for like the last, 20 years or so, for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you for those dietary changes. And what do you think are some of the biggest challenges you face in promoting integrative health, especially in the context of aging? Like, are you pushing a big rock up a hill, a boulder up a hill, or do you think that more and more people, including the medical community, by the way, are embracing this way of thinking and living?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, if I talk to the public, it is not pushing a rock up a hill, a boulder up a hill. In systems, especially those dependent on the insurance industry, it is pushing a massive boulder up a hill because they're not focused on any one person. It is not personalized medicine. And medicine has to be, by definition, medicine must be personalized. However, the insurance industry is not about personalizing care for anyone.
Right.
And so we are faced all the time with denials, simple things. When I want to check certain blood tests, they don't feel it's justified because they're not aligned around prevention. And they're not quick adopters of new technology or new studies or new realizations through studies. So I think the insurance industry is a huge impediment. I think that there are some insurance companies that are making some small gestures of changes, but I think there has to be a complete shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
I also think the way we train medical students, as I mentioned before, we train them in hospitals. We don't train them in outpatient centers. We don't train them in gyms. We don't train them out in the community enough because the overwhelming majority of us do not spend time in hospitals. Most of us have chronic degenerative issues, or if we develop them, they're chronic low-grade issues that don't buy us a ticket necessarily until we're quite ill into the hospital.
Right.
And we should be producing doctors who can look at someone early and say, I'm concerned for this in the long run, beyond the cholesterol thing, which I still don't feel like we're handling properly. Really thinking in terms of a careful family history, a careful lifestyle assessment, very in-depth labs, and the ability to sit down with somebody to take the time to educate them and teach them, this is what I see in the future, and this is how you can prevent that. So what would you like to do? What do you feel you can do?
Right.
So the system's not set up for it. The typical primary care doc has no more than 15 minutes per patient. You can't address these issues. So I feel like the systems that we have in place do not help us in integrative health. The good news is many people realize this and are building things outside of traditional healthcare model because they want health. They don't just want to address disease. They want to prevent what their parents had. And they're willing to do the work to do it. Yeah. They're willing to make the investment to do it. So I think that's a big piece of it. And then I think our food system certainly does not help. Our food system, you have to be so careful when you shop to get food that's not tainted with toxins and pesticides and so forth, to not buy things mostly in the center of the grocery store that are packaged so brilliantly and marketed so cleverly. You just have to buy food. Like if you can't recognize where this grows or lives, it doesn't belong in your system, no matter how enticing they make it. By the way, they do such an incredible job crafting food to maximize its impact on you. It's genius, but it's a form of psychological warfare, I think.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make it easy for any of us. We really have to be tough when we go out there to stores. And you're right, what you just said is like, so I'm sure so many people, including myself, we have to kind of take this matters into our own hands. Is like, to move more and eat the right things. And you may not be getting these directives from a healthcare practitioner. And you may have to just, like I said, take matters into your own hands. It would be a lot better if we could partner with a trusted healthcare provider, but not everybody has access to such a person like as yourself. I want to get back to something.
The good news is, just on that point, the good news is the work that you're doing, for instance, and the availability of the information really from the people who are doing the work, who are either doing the research or seeing the patients. Really, people have access to all of our minds now. I do think making change is challenging. So I think working with health coaches, which gives access to everyone, you can get online with a health coach, and they, in a very non-judgmental way, can help you work towards your goals. Or family members or friends, starting a walking group, one of the things that we haven't addressed is the critical importance as we age of relationships. So
yes, we haven't touched on that.
Yeah.
That's right. We know that loneliness is an epidemic in this country.
Yes.
Actually around the world.
Yes.
And that can wreak great havoc with our overall health and wellness, as you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to something that you said a little while ago about cholesterol. And you said that we are not handling, I'm paraphrasing you, sorry, we're not handling this well. Tell us what you mean.
Well, I mean, rates of heart disease have done nothing but increase.
Yeah.
We have made very little impact on cardiovascular disease, despite widespread use of statins. I think the issue that people don't realize is it's probably sugar and insulin spikes that do more damage to our blood vessel linings than anything else. So we've been very focused on cholesterol because we have a easy prescription to write. And I'm not saying that statins are not appropriate, because they are, but I think we've done our job if we've written out a statin prescription, and that nothing could be farther from the truth. Statins are very interesting medications. They're both an anti-inflammatory and can lower cholesterol, but it can come at a cost, including, especially in women, an increased risk for diabetes. It also plays a role in how we generate energy. So when people get muscle aches, that is a manifestation of a significant disruption of energy production in the body. So again, I'm not against statins. However, we're indiscriminately using it, and we're calling it a day once we've written that prescription for patients. What we really need to concentrate on is getting blood sugar levels very stable so that you don't see insulin spikes, so that doesn't have a negative impact on the liver's production of cholesterol, especially the more sticky, violent, aggressive forms of cholesterol. Keeping blood pressure low so there's no injury to the blood vessel wall to begin with. And that's done best probably through exercise and stress modification, like you see not only when you breathe, like you were describing before, you're slowing your heart rate. But if I did a blood pressure at the same time, you're lowering your blood pressure.
Yes.
So you're making your blood vessels much more fluid and flexible and at ease, as opposed to the tension that develops over time with stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my little piece on the statins.
No, and I agree with everything you just said. And speaking of blood pressure, I saw some studies, and in fact, I mentioned this in a talk I gave recently in Nashville about doing some isometric exercises can actually help lower your blood pressure on the spot.
Yes.
And also, if done consistently, can help keep your blood pressure low without medication.
Yes.
And I thought, like, why wouldn't everybody try that? It takes 10 minutes at best, at most. You know, it's doing a wall squat for a few minutes and taking and doing it again, and then doing the plank because you're holding yourself still. I found that absolutely fascinating. And why everybody isn't doing that. I just can't, it's like one of those things, like, this is great research. They've shown that it works. Why not just do it? You're not, it's like, there's no downside to it. And at the same time, you're like toning up your body, helping your muscles, right? All good. Nothing bad.
Yes. Yeah. I just want to make a mention, you said that piece again about breathing. Mm-hmm. There was a cardiologist, I think he was out of University of Illinois several years ago, who also discovered the value of breathing in lowering blood pressure. And he designed a tool called Respirit. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And it basically, you just match your breathing to the movement of these LED lights. And he showed through several scientific studies that it resulted in a sustained lowering of blood pressure. So this ancient technique of slowing down your breath and being aware of your breathing can have profound physiologic changes. And it's been now proven.
That's fascinating. And I don't know about that, but I would like to get that link and I will add it into the show notes. So everyone who's interested, who's listening, watching, can check that out, including me. So thank you for that. Okay. So I think we kind of covered how you see the whole healthcare industry evolving. You will continue to push that boulder up that hill, clearly, in your own way. And we're hopeful that as time goes on, that more physicians will move in your direction, insurance companies will get on board, and of course, that people will see the benefit in changing their lives, in some cases in very small ways, but sustainable ways. And that's the thing too. As I often like to say, these can't be one-offs. Like, you can't say, well, I'm going to go take that walk after dinner for 30 minutes to help lower my blood sugar level, and then you don't do it again for a week. It's like, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We are talking about developing healthy habits. And, you said something earlier, and I forget the term you used, but basically they start with something, like take movement, and that can become your foundational habit. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with me. Like, this all happened with me, or for me, when I turned 50, went through menopause, was starting to, estrogen levels were at the bottom, and all kinds of changes were taking place. I was gaining a little weight, feeling just like really grumpy, lumpy, dumpy about the whole thing. And then I took action and I started running. So my foundational habit became walking, and then which turned into running, and I do the run walk. And then from there, other habits followed. And so, we never want people to get overwhelmed where they then do nothing and they put the blanket over their heads, right? So, yeah, I think, start with something, everyone. And then other things will follow, because you'll want to, like, I wanted to be a better runner. So I started eating better. And because I was running and eating better, I was sleeping better, and on and on and on.
Right.
And that's how change happens.
You're describing your definition of yourself began to change through the actions that you took.
Yes.
And they started out pretty small. I mean, when we're talking a 10-minute walk after dinner,
yes,
you're literally walking out the door for 5 minutes and turning around and walking back. Most of us can manage that, right?
Yes.
So, and you just see once you start doing that and you notice, oh, I do feel a little better. My digestion is a little bit better. I slept a little bit better. That itself is the encouragement to continue.
Yes. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. And I hope everyone, you just kind of listen to this. These are easy to do, including that lowering your blood pressure stuff we just talked about. Not hard.
Right.
Not hard. So could I ask, what do you do? Like, what's your typical day?
So I mostly get a great night's sleep, though I do have a habit of waking up at 3:00 in the morning and solving the world's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I have a
It's kind of hard not to.
Yes. And I do have a strategy for helping myself get back to sleep. It's a combination of a breathing strategy with something that I repeat over and over, and it works. So I get up very early in the morning, usually 4:30, 5, no later than 5 typically. And then I always have a cup of coffee because I so enjoy that first thing in the morning, and I read. I'll do a meditation, and that can either be a 5-minute meditation, a 20-minute meditation, depends on the day. And then I pretty consistently go work out. The way I work out right now, I do it because it's on my way to work, and it's the one part of the day where I don't have to make any decisions. So it's called Sweat for 40. And basically for 40 minutes, I'm doing a series of exercises that I don't have to decide on. I don't have to decide how long for because it's all done for me. So for me, that works because it works. I can integrate it into the flow of my day.
Have you eaten yet at this point?
No,
or you've only had coffee. Okay.
Right. Right. And then I'll eat somewhere usually around 10:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But then by that time I'm at work. I have a standing desk at work. So when I'm seeing patients by telehealth, I will be standing, or if I'm in meetings, I'm standing. And then throughout the day, I'll do those exercise snacks like you mentioned, mostly to improve my energy. So like at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll feel a drop.
Yes.
And I'll do a set of squats right in my office. I mean, I've excused myself from patients to go and just do a quick set of squats to get the energy flowing a little bit more.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Some jumping jacks, some squats, some lunges, like whatever you need to do. The plank, I always like do the plank throughout the day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because I think what happens, particularly, I have more of a sedentary work life because I'm listening to patients much of the time. I can't really be moving around in that way. So I think what my body is calling for, and this harkens back to what we were saying before, my body's saying, I need some movement. I need to get a little energy flowing through the system. So instead of getting a cup of coffee at 2:00, which is what a lot of us would tend to do, I just move, and it has the same, if not better, I would say better effect, because then it won't interfere with my sleep at night.
Right. Absolutely right.
And then I have a light dinner, and I'm in bed usually by 9:30.
Yeah, because you do get up so early. I'm usually in bed by 10, and I get up maybe an hour after you. 6:00 is my norm.
Yeah, these are perfect. That's actually, sleep researchers say it's probably 10:00 is the right time for most adults.
Yeah, I find that when I stay up late, and of course, sometimes you have to, there are social reasons. And I find that when I do go to sleep or go into bed later, like by 11 or midnight, I'm wired.
Yes.
10:00, 10:30 is clearly my natural sleep time.
Right.
No question.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And when we push past that, we get a little bit of a cortisol surge, which will keep us up longer. That's the wired part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question about it. So that is something I've been doing for quite some time once I became more educated, when I went through this whole turning 50 and what is going on and educated myself, in partnership with many, many healthcare professionals that I've had access to. So I've been very fortunate, and I have been taking their advice along the way. And as you pointed out, this is all evolving. New research like the microbiome research, it's coming out every day. new information about all of this. And that's why it's so important to for us all to keep on top of that. And the good news is that we do have such easy access to information, to people like you. I mean, we can find you on YouTube and read everything you've written and other experts. And that's wonderful. On the other hand, though, it can sometimes be confusing and overwhelming, which is why I really like to have experts like you on the show to kind of cut through a lot of the noise and really get to those things that people can really do, really embrace, like today, right now. So this is so important. Dr. Koffler, this was an amazing conversation. I am so grateful that you were on the show sharing your knowledge. And before we let you go, can you give us your 3 or however many you like takeaways, like your best takeaways you really want to make sure the Age Better audience remembers from our talk today?
I don't want to be redundant. We've covered a lot.
You know, I just want to tell you something that I learned back when I was in corporate America early on in my career. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. That's how people will remember. So go for it.
All right. So first and foremost, begin to move. And if you're already moving, don't be afraid to build strength. So what that means is using excellent form. And if you need a physical therapist to ensure that you have great form, that is very available. You no longer need a prescription in order to go to physical therapist from your physician anymore. You can go straight to a physical therapist. And that's really important as we age because we want to make sure you're holding yourself correctly. Your core is engaged as you move weight, but seek to build muscle.
Yes.
We are losing muscle mass as we age. One of the most important biomarkers of healthy aging is how much muscle we are taking with us as we age. So we should all be invested in building muscle. When it comes to food, again, what Michael Pollan says, eat real food, not too much. There's a Japanese saying, hara hachi bu. It means eat until you're 80% full. There are like at least a dozen hormones and neurotransmitters that are communicating between the fat, the gut, and the brain to tell us that we're satiated. The moment you feel that, you're done. Listen to the wisdom of your body and put your fork down, give it a rest. There's another meal coming. So I think honoring that wisdom of your body to tell you when you've had enough to eat and don't push past it, and that's when you start upsetting cellular function. Do the best you can to ensure restorative sleep. That means it's restorative sleep when you wake up in the morning and you feel like, oh, wow, I had a great night's sleep. I love the Apple Watch. We often tell people to get an Oura ring, which I think is also really quite good at helping us see the quality of our sleep. And if you're not getting good quality sleep, then it's time to see someone who can help you with that.
Yes.
And I think we touched on it a bit, but, Vivek Murthy, who's our Surgeon General, really has done a beautiful job highlighting the importance of relationships, like real relationships, not Snapchat, texting relationships, but real conversations, real extensions towards people. And that includes altruism, which has been shown to improve quality of life as we age. It's not easy if you are not surrounded by family and friends as you get older to create those relationships. But there's such phenomenal need in every one of our communities, whether it's in homeless shelters or in childcare or in elder care or in environmental issues, or the list goes on and on. Get involved and create your community. We are like my dog who hates when we leave him outside for 1 second longer than he has to pee. We are pack animals. We do best in a pack, right? It used to be punishment to excise you outside of the tribe. So granted, it's a moment of vulnerability, but it's worth it to create relationships that are sustaining to you and to the other person. That has a huge impact on healthy aging.
It really does. Thank you so much for those tips. I hope everyone listening and watching will really take those to heart and actually start to use them starting today. Thank you so much, Dr. Koffler, and I hope you'll come back.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then, subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.